Welcome occultists to a new video. These are a couple of short stories that are honestly very eerie. If you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. The deal was supposed to be simple. I've done it 100 times before: meet, exchange, leave. No names, no faces, just the unspoken agreement between shadows and the night. But this time was different. This time, the location was an abandoned school that had once been an asylum, a place with a history so dark it seemed to seep from the very walls. I should have known better than to agree to it, but the payout was too good to pass up. So there I was, driving down a forgotten road, the skeletal remains of trees lining my path like mourners at a funeral procession. The school loomed ahead, a monolithic structure shrouded in mist, its windows like empty eye sockets staring into the void. The air was thick with the scent of decay as I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Graffiti covered the walls, the desperate scribbles of those who dared venture here before me. I tried to focus on the task at hand, but the oppressive atmosphere of the building weighed heavily on me, a tangible reminder of the suffering that had once filled these halls. I made my way to the agreed-upon location, the remnants of what had once been the cafeteria. The moonlight streamed through the broken windows, casting eerie shadows across the floor. I waited, the silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. That's when the whispers started, soft and insidious, curling around the edges of my consciousness. I spun around, searching for the source, but there was nothing, just the empty room and the weight of eyes I couldn't see. I convinced myself it was just the wind, or rats scurrying in the walls. But deep down, I knew it was something else, something far older and more malevolent than anything as mundane as rodents. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that filled the room, each one begging, pleading, screaming for release. I covered my ears, but it did nothing to block out the sound. That's when I saw them, figures in the shadows, twisted and broken, their eyes hollow pits of despair. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the figures advanced. They were the former patients, their suffering etched into every line of their faces, their bodies contorted by years of abuse and neglect. I turned to run, but the corridors twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the heart of the asylum. The air grew colder, my breath forming clouds in front of me as I ran. Doors slammed shut of their own accord, the sound echoing like gunshots in the silence. I could hear them behind me, the shuffle of feet, the ragged breaths, always just a step behind. I found myself in what had once been the treatment room, the rusted remains of restraints still attached to the walls. The air was thick with the scent of blood and fear, a palpable reminder of the atrocities committed in the name of science. The door slammed shut behind me, plunging the room into darkness. My phone was my only source of light, its feeble glow barely penetrating the gloom. I could see them now, all around me, their faces inches from mine, their whispers now screams of rage and pain. I was trapped, caught in a nightmare from which there was no escape. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The room was empty, the door ajar, the corridor beyond silent. I didn't question it, I just ran, fueled by a terror that lent speed to my limbs. I burst from the building, the night air a balm to my senses, and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I drove away from the place at breakneck speed, the asylum a dark silhouette in my rearview mirror. I abandoned the deal, the money, everything. Nothing was worth the horror of what I had experienced. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, the stress of the deal playing tricks on my mind. But the memories were too vivid, too real to be anything but the truth. I had seen the remnants of those tortured souls, felt their pain and despair. I never went back to that place, never even drove down that road again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear the whispers, the echoes of those lost souls reaching out from the darkness. The abandoned asylum stands as a testament to the cruelty of man, a place where the past is very much alive, waiting to ensnare the unwary. I've left that life behind, the deals, the drugs, all of it. But the memory of that night will stay with me forever, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks in the forgotten corners of the world. I was lucky to escape with my life, but there are things far worse than death waiting in the shadows of that abandoned asylum. I always thought the worst part of high school was the endless homework with a mind-numbing routine, but I was wrong. It's funny how your entire world can flip on its head in just one night. It was supposed to be a harmless adventure, a final act of rebellion before graduation. My best friend, Alex, and I decided to break into our school after hours, just to say we did it. But what we discovered in the darkened hallways of Lincoln High School was far more terrifying than any detention we could have earned. The plan was simple. Sneak in, take a selfie in the principal's office wearing his oversized graduation hats, and sneak out. The thrill of doing something so forbidden with my best friend by my side was exhilarating. The lock on the back door gave way easily, a sign that maybe this was meant to be. The school at night was a different world, eerie and silent, the lockers like sentinels watching our every move. As we made our way to the principal's office, a sound stopped us dead in our tracks. A whimper, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. Alex heard it too, his face mirroring my fear. It was coming from the direction of the science labs. The rational part of me screamed to leave, to forget this ever happened, but the part that needed to know, to uncover the source of that sound, won. We followed the noise, our phones the only source of light in the pitch-black corridor. The whimper grew into a sob, a sound so filled with pain it made my heart race. Outside Mr. Henderson's lab, the door ajar, the sobs were accompanied by a sickening wet sound, like flesh being torn. Mr. Henderson, the mild-mannered biology teacher, admired by students for his passionate lectures, stood over a figure strapped to one of the lab tables. The figure was motionless, the front of their shirt soaked with blood. Around him, like some grotesque audience, were other tables, each with a student bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. Alex gasped beside me, the sound piercing the silence. Mr. Henderson's head snapped towards us, his eyes not the warm brown I remembered but a cold, dead black. What happened next was a blur of motion, Alex pulling me back, the scream that tore from my throat, and the chase that ensued through the dark, labyrinthine corridors of the school. We ran, our breaths ragged, the sound of Mr. Henderson's footsteps a constant echo behind us. The school was a maze, each turn leading us further into despair. We found ourselves at a dead end, the weight of our mistake crushing. That's when Mr. Henderson appeared, blocking our only way out, a scalpel gleaming in his hand. The look on his face wasn't human, it was predatory, a monster reveling in the hunt. He spoke then, his voice calm, explaining his actions with a twisted logic that chilled my blood. He was purifying us, he said, freeing us from the sins of our youth with each cut, each scream. In that moment, I knew we were going to die. The resignation was paralyzing, but it was Alex who found the strength I lacked. With a cry, he charged at Mr. Henderson, tackling him to the ground. "Run," he yelled, struggling against the man who had taught us about the human heart, yet seemed to lack one himself. I hesitated, torn between escaping and leaving my best friend, but the fear of ending up on one of those tables propelled me forward. I ran until my lungs burned, until the night air hit my face, and I was outside, free but alone. The police found me an hour later, huddled by the school gates, my clothes stained with my friend's blood. The horror of what they discovered inside would haunt our small town for years. Mr. Henderson was found in his lab, subdued by the very students he sought to purify. Alex was among them, injured but alive. The others weren't so lucky. The trial was a media circus, the details of Mr. Henderson's experiments on his students emerging like the plot of some twisted horror movie. He spoke of visions, of voices that commanded him to act, of a darkness that needed to be fed. He looked at me during the trial, his eyes hollow, and I knew the man who had once been a pillar of our community was gone, consumed by whatever madness had claimed him. I visit Alex often, the bond between us now forged in trauma. We don't talk about that night, about what we saw, or the friends we lost. Some horrors are too deep to voice, their shadows lingering long after the physical wounds have healed. The school remained closed after that, a grim reminder of the evil that had walked its halls. As for me, I left town the first chance I got, eager to escape the memories, the whispers, the pitying looks. But no matter how far I go, I can't escape the nightmares, the faces of those students, the sound of their cries, and the sight of Mr. Henderson, a man I once respected, turned monster by unseen forces. That night at Lincoln High School taught me that true horror doesn't come from ghosts or ghouls, but from the darkness within, a darkness that can consume even the most unlikely among us. I learned the hard way that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are the ones hiding behind familiar faces, waiting for the night to fall so they can reveal their true natures.